Welcome to the 5 Minute Mind Podcast. I am your host, Shane Hazen, and after a brief sabbatical, I am back with co-host Ted Haycraft.
Sporadic co-host Ted Haycraft.
Sporadical Ted. Yeah. Well, the last month we took a little time off, so sporadic applies to everything, not just
true.
you. Coming up on this episode, we are talking for 4th of July, the musical.
Sit down, John. Sit down, John. For God's sake, John, sit down.
I forgot the middle initial. Peter E. Hunt.
Yeah, I thought it was H. Hunt. Is it?
H. Hunt. Peter H. Hunt's 1976. At least that's the theatrical version of the stage musical that came out in 1972. There's a bunch of numbers. Hope you remember all that. But first off, what I watched this week, what Ted watched this week. Ted, what'd you watch this week?
Actually, there's on my docket I just watched was 2 films in the theater, 3 things on video, and a book.
We're hold off on the book.
I know.
We're going to do the book
we do the book
next week, which if you guys are astute listeners, you guys can probably surmise what that book is.
The 2 films in the theater, the Spark Brothers.
I watched Spark Brothers.
And I saw
I saw that last week.
In the Heights. Well, okay.
You watched In the Heights this week? I watched In the Heights
yeah.
this week. I watched In the Heights this week in prep because I knew we were going to be talking about Hamilton on this episode.
And then I also watched, sort of last week, but this is on my mind, was 1776, Revolution Revisited, and The Patriot.
You watch prep movies.
Movies, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then I did.
Do those count?
Okay, then I also watched there's a documentary on William Friedkin talking about The Exorcist called Leap of Faith by the guy Alexandre Philippe, who did a documentary on Alien, and he did a documentary on the psycho shower curtain scene. It was really interesting. A lot of times, for a little bit of Friedkin goes a long way, but I really enjoyed this.
Well said, Ted. Well said.
And there's some really interesting nods and some interesting behind the stuff scenes that I hadn't really heard on The Exorcist as of yet. So
the main things. What I watched this last week that's interesting is going to continue even after we're done talking about this, because we're recording this the day before July 4th and as Independence Day, as we will talk about in the episode. But last year was a no-show for movies, basically, and this year there is a legitimate, you may negatively call it a dump, but a push of the streamers, that the movies the streamers were buying from the major companies that were, because they couldn't release them theatrically, or they weren't, mainly something like the Forever War, but like there's a bunch of movies that are being pushed onto the streamers that are just coming out this week. So I watched No Sudden Move, the new Soderbergh movie, just came out Thursday.
Man, I'm so buying Soderbergh because all he's doing is streaming movies.
Yeah, he really is. He really is, and
it's killing me.
It's an interesting movie. One of the cool. It's. Have you ever read Soderbergh's essay on Chinatown that he has on his website?
No.
He talks about how much of a formative movie for him it is, just because of I think he uses the phrase that the camera is always in the right place, and but at the same time he also describes how the camera. They use mostly the same lens. It's always kind of anywhere from eye level to shoulder level most of the time, maybe a little lower. And this movie really is a noir. It's a period noir that I've heard multiple people compare to Chinatown, even though the content doesn't. But there's this weird musical choice in the movie where I don't know how to describe it except to say that reverb strings instantly evokes, it's hard, it rubs, it's hard to not evoke Chinatown with this, when you hear it, you're just did he use a cue from Chinatown in this movie? There's a few other movies I'm going to plan on watching, but I went to the theater once this week and saw Zola yesterday, and
because I've been thinking about it, because A24
A24,
yeah, and
I am torn to talk about this just because I've made a point. I really don't want to talk negatively about movies. I don't think it's worth the oxygen to say bad stuff about a movie, especially if someone's interested in maybe seeing this movie and might like it.
No.
What is the worth of really saying something crappy about it?
Yeah.
This movie was not for me. Let's just leave it at that.
Did you notice The Summer of Soul's playing here too?
What is?
The Summer of Soul.
I think I might do that on Hulu. I might stay at home for that.
AMC's got it.
But that's the Questlove documentary.
Yeah.
Again, so much stuff on the 4th is still coming out. This used to be the biggest weekend, one of the biggest weekends of the year for film. like spectacle wise, like spectacles. The studio puts.
You mean down the road, not this weekend? The whole.
No, I mean
What
July
else?
4th weekend was the movie that all studios are like, this is the movie we want to put our biggest home run bet
But
on.
there isn't.
Well, it's different this year.
Yeah.
It's just different. But it's still July 4th, even though like I'm barely going to go to the theater and I don't want to go to the theater with a crowd.
Yeah.
There's still like there's some pushes. Like we're talking 1776, and when this episode's heavily onto the revolution, I want to watch the animated America the Motion Picture also too this weekend too. Yeah, and so with that, let's should we move on to the episode and talk 1776?
Yeah, I was going to say I did notice that the parking lot started to fill up a little bit more at Showplace with Fast and Furious.
Fast
I
9,
assume,
yeah.
Fast 9, F9, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, like we're not there yet.
Yeah.
We're not there yet. We're getting closer, but we're not yet. So anyway, on to 1776. AJ, even though it's TV on the radio, you are wearing an appropriate T-shirt right now. Your Hamilton T-shirt.
Yep.
I was going to wear my Captain America T-shirt, but I'll save it for tomorrow, the 4th of July.
There is a Captain America musical at some point, right?
Probably will be.
Okay. So, yeah, it's bound to happen. So everybody, we're talking 1776. I think I meant to watch this movie just because of you guys' enthusiasm. You both, I'm with Lani and AJ Gonzalez and Ted Haycraft. You guys over the years have been the ones that not even really advocated for seeing the movie, but you'd mention seeing the movie. And I was like, oh shit, this is one of those like, it was on the list of library movies. I was like, I'm never getting around to that 3-hour 70s musical. And I eventually watched it like a few years ago. But Lani and AJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys watch this pretty consistently.
We watch it every year on the 4th of July weekend. So yes, it's become a tradition.
When did this tradition start?
I don't know, maybe like well, how long have we lived in this house?
9 years.
Yeah, so maybe 9 years.
Did you two independently like realize you both liked it?
Well, I saw it. I saw it maybe about a little bit earlier than that, just on Turner Classic Movies. They played it one year, and I watched it, and I had never seen it before. But I'm always up for any kind of musical. I'll always give it a shot. And I was like, wow, what? I've never seen this before, and I like it. And why haven't I ever watched this before? And then I made AJ watch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had already seen it and already liked it. I'd never seen the restored director's cut before.
You saw the theatrical cut. Okay.
Yeah, I saw it on TV on the cable channel Encore, if that's still around.
Ted's going to want to brag about this in a second, but he just held up his laser disc of 1776 for all you listeners out there. You saw it on Encore, you said?
Yeah, I saw an Encore late night. I was just flipping through the channels. It's like 1 a.m. and I was, staying up late on purpose for no reason. And there was this movie that looked like a Revolutionary War movie. And the thing that made me stop and watch it was I heard the distinct and unmistakable voice of Mr. Feeney talking about American independence. And I'm like, that's Mr. Feeney, but he's a young man. He's like 40 in the movie.
William Daniels. I don't know if we need to go too in depth with it, but as much as iconic for you as Mr. Feeney, he's very iconic to my childhood because he's the voice of Kit, the car in Knight Rider.
And for me, he's Captain Nice from the 60s.
Does that do anything for you guys? It does nothing for me. Who's Captain Nice?
It was at the throes of the Batman, when Batman hit really big in 66. The other networks came out with superhero movie, TV series, and he was Captain Nice. It was a parody.
Oh.
Buck Henry, I think, worked on it. And he had
Buck Henry?
Nice. I think it's
so it's like post Get Smart?
Around the same time, or it was or next was his next project. But of course, I also St. Elsewhere is big in my.
Fair enough. Wasn't he like a president of the Screen Actors Guild or something for a while too, or something?
He was.
Yep.
And St. Elsewhere's got Bruce Patrol production, which
Paltrow.
is his wife is Blythe Danner.
Blythe Danner, who's in this
anyway.
movie. Ted, you're probably chomping.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping.
Do you want to tell your story of seeing?
No, was AJ finished with?
Just that I had never heard of this movie. Like the Revolutionary War is so important to American history, but there's no just movies about it. And like, but here's a movie about it. No one told me about this, so I was telling everyone about it from when I was like 13 on. And then when we saw it again, I guess it was the director's cut, and I was like, "This is even better than I remember."
What are the movies about the Revolutionary War? Like, I mean, my head's going to The Patriot right now, and that's all I got.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing I want to talk about in here. It's about why is there a dearth? Is it the proper word? Dearth of revolutionary,
Use that right.
Colonial period movies. The most important part of our history. And I said, box office poison. Is it nobody wants to tackle it, or nobody cares?
Do you want to do this now? Or do you want to do this later? Because I have some thoughts on it too.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, it doesn't matter if you want.
I want to know when Ted saw it. Did you see it when it came out?
Yeah. Well, I have an interesting story for that. 8th grade, 1972. I'm in 8th grade. My parents sent me and my sister to New York City on our own. Back then, you would drop your kids on an airplane. And my aunt, and send us to New York City. And my aunt, who was a really cool aunt, she's a lawyer. She was living with Gino, who was an Italian Jew, who was a member of Mensa. Is that the intelligence organization? Yeah, he's a member of that. The
intellectual thing.
Yeah, and he was really kind of they were counterculture, long hair. He was long hair.
Where they live?
In Manhattan. And
do you know in Manhattan?
I don't remember exactly where. But so they decided that we're going to educate our kid, me and my sister, and go to New York and hang out with them for a week or so. I guess it's Thanksgiving break maybe. But 1776 was the Christmas program for Radio City Music Hall that year. With the Rockettes, the big opening, the big hoop-de-doo, and the Rockettes show and all this stuff. So my aunt decides that the first thing we're going to do the day we get off the airplane, I assume we went to the apartment to drop the luggage off. She takes us straight to Radio City Music Hall.
Was this just like to see Radio City Music Hall?
Well,
or was
to see that, to see the Rockettes and the movie. Well, Dawn, my sister, and I proceeded to fall asleep in the movie. I mean, we've been up all night. We were on the airplane. We're so excited. We get in the dark theater. I'm 8th grade. She's like 4 years younger than me. So we just zoned out. So my aunt got really mad, and I only remember little snippets of it from that 1972. I don't know where, but later, somewhere along the line, because of that occasion, I revisited it, and I fell in love with the film. I love the film, and I've tried to, stayed up with it on different versions of it. And my aunt still thinks to this day that I hate it because I fell asleep in it. I can't convince her that how much I love the film. But I did get to see it on its opening run in 72, the theatrical version.
And you don't remember the next time you saw it?
No, I don't remember where I start catching up to it.
I have a very unmemorable time of watching it. I think I watched it on TCM maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It was one of my last summers in Austin. And every time they complained about the heat in the movie, I was like, you don't know shit because you're not in Austin in this summer right now. Because it was that period when my apartment had only window units and you'd have them blasting and it would still be 90 degrees in my apartment.
What prompted you? Was it because them? Okay.
Lonnie and AJ doing this as a yearly thing.
Well, and I think it's a good summer movie just because of what you said, because, you watch it at the same time, around the time that it takes place, and you can kind of empathize with the heat.
Yeah, I take it back. I wasn't exactly complaining like, oh, you don't know what it's like because you're not in Texas. I was thinking more along the lines of like I was in my apartment in 90 degrees and just being like, this is life in that time. What is life with all this heat all around? Which everyone listening to this, especially anyone in the Pacific Northwest right now, it sucks. Intensive heat sucks. But so I think this is going to be one of those, my favorite episodes so far have been the ones where I feel like the guests like the movie more than I do.
Okay.
So, yeah, I just wanted you guys to maybe this is just going to be a three. Like I'm just going to be an observer on this
when
episode.
you saw it back on TCM the first time, were you let down, or were your expectations too high, or
no?
Are you a musical person? I mean, give us some.
I like a little bit of I like musicals. This movie struck me as one of those tail end of the what the four wall musical era is one of the big thing. I mean, Jack Warner produced this movie. And I'm pretty sure Jack Warner wasn't involved with Warner's anymore, except for whatever productions of his was grandfather did.
This is a Columbia movie.
It's a Columbia movie.
It's a Columbia movie,
Yeah,
and Jack
yeah.
Warner produced this.
Yes, it was this big.
Because he was an independent producer at the time. This was actually the first movie that he ever produced because he had always been the head of the studio, so he wasn't actually a producer.
Wow. I don't want to jump ahead linearly, but like the movie is effective for me. It's a 3-hour movie that for me only really kicks in at a specific moment near the end. And we can go into exactly what that entails, but I for my head, for some reason, I whenever you look this movie up online, it always is 1776 parentheses 17 or 1972, which always just struck me as odd because I thought it was strictly a bicentennial movie. I thought like this movie had to have come out in 1976, and
they did re-release it at Radio City Music Hall in '76 for a special run.
Well, it also goes to the question of why. Maybe we should jump into this. Why aren't there Revolutionary War movies? Maybe we should jump to this now because it gets to my issue of like, it's the most American mythologized period. It's the thing that is most kind of papered over to the point of nothingness, and anything that's might be interesting or flawed about these people is kind of frowned upon to talk about to a certain extent. And this movie's interesting because it gets into, well, no, there's conflict, even though it's still like there's one of the quotes I had earlier was, I think it's Adam says at some point, or no, it's Franklin says, we've spanned a new race here. We're rougher, Americans are rougher, simpler, more violent, more enterprising, less refined. We're a new nationality. We're required a new nation. And again, that strikes me as self-mythology. And then the tumbleweed came through.
Well, it is interesting that our favorite myth is the West, and in expansion and the gunfights and the going out west. That it seems to be overshadow this part of our myth.
What are the to the conversation earlier? What are the other Revolutionary War movies?
Well, see, that's funny. I actually did just now this week. Last week I was digging out my 1776. I also got Revolution Revisited, the new cut of Revolution, which I watched
with Al Pacino. It's Al Pacino as someone who joins the revolution in 1776.
What time period is this?
Hugh
from?
Hudson. It's after Greystoke and
It's 1985.
Oh.
And it did so badly it never even made Evansville. I didn't see it in the theater.
Okay.
And then they actually did a recut. And it's called, if you buy the DVD now, it's called Revolution Revisited. And there's a little Hugh Hudson and Al Pacino actually talk together on it in a feature about what they fixed on it. Then there's also, I watched The Patriot with Mel Gibson.
What'd you think of that?
Well, that's like 180 degrees start from Hugh Hudson and Revolution. It's like an 80s action hero meets Shenandoah.
Jump forward to next year. The other movie I thought about doing for July 4th is a movie that is not the smartest movie, but a movie very close to my heart is Independence Day. So we may do an Independence Day episode next year. But Patriot is Emmerich and Dean Devlin too. And like I always remember thinking that like their whole thing was that they desperately wanted John Williams to do a score, and with the Patriot they finally got John Williams to do a score for them. But
And then when you ask about other films, there's D.D. McGriffith trying to tackle it. D.D. McGriffith did a film on Washington and the Colonial War, the Revolutionary War, back in the silent period. And then there's Drums Belong to Mohawk with John Ford, with Henry Fonda and Fred Colbert.
I've been on my John Ford kick, and I don't think I've ever seen that. Do you guys have any thoughts on Revolutionary War representation in American film or in film in general?
I mean, the only thing I could think of is just that the figures Washington and Adams and Jefferson and the whole crew are so like mythologized, like they're the founders, they're the founding fathers, like Rome had Romulus and Remus, or uh, Virgil for that other myth that they made up halfway through their republic for some reason. Uh, that to portray them, it would have to be a pageant where you're just like gonna watch the great men do the great things and they're great infallible men, or you make it where they're like really horny and they swear a lot and they don't like each other and they have problems and they compromise on things that maybe they shouldn't compromise on, but really I guess they should, so they can just get this done. To for that like, oh, like it's George Washington and Ben Franklin, but actually it's John Adams, this little guy that no one really liked, that was able to get people, friendly people, likable people like Franklin and Jefferson to win over other people to get his plan across. He was the angry nerd that had the plan.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin was the cool kid.
I don't necessarily want to bridge from this, but the two movies I watched in prep for this were 1776, and I rewatched the Disney Plus Hamilton. I rewatched that for this just because I think that was kind of in my back of my brain of why we should do this episode, just because of Hamilton's current popularity of the last 6 years, 7 years, and like, but it's a Broadway musical about the founding of America and the overlaps, and I had that superficially when I rewatched Hamilton and both this like right next to each other. I was like, man, these two do not overlap. Like Jefferson is the only overlap between these
But
two.
they do it. They there's a sneaky nod to 1776.
AJ, you want to take that? Because when I mentioned doing the episode, you brought this up right away.
Yeah, so the opening song of 1776 is called Sit Down, John. John Adams comes into Congress and says, I've decided that 1 useless man is a disgrace, 2 are called a law firm, and 3 or more are a Congress. And then he starts in on independency, and they all stand up and say, Sit down, John. And that's the first song. And then in Hamilton...
It is a fun song. I will give that.
I love it. In the second act, after Washington leaves, John Adams becomes president, and he does not like Hamilton, fires him from his position in the government, and Hamilton writes, a screed against John Adams. And in the play, Lin-Manuel Miranda drops this huge, like, book of his, like, writings and says, Sit down, John, you fat mother, and drops it onto the stage.
Yeah.
I caught one other thing where watching Hamilton again, where there's some point where they're talking to Eliza, and there's some mention of being dissatisfied, and I couldn't remember. Like Adams at one point later in the movie musical says, "I have always been dissatisfied," but I don't know if that overlaps into the thing you were talking about, Ted, earlier, where you were talking about the repeating phrases of 1776.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
It's maybe a stretch.
I think it just speaks to the character of both Adams and Hamilton as men, and just kind of their ambition and their standards that they held for themselves, to be always working towards something and wanting to get things done and being very much men of action, and, never satisfied to just kind of sit and let things go by. So I think in that way they were similar. They obviously had differences. But...
Well, in Hamilton, it's treated as a romantic thing. Like you're not it's this overlap of like.
It has more than one meaning.
Yes, it's not just about progress in.
That specific line in Hamilton is taken from something in real life, but from Ron Chernow's biography. Late in life, someone was visiting Eliza Hamilton, and he said she looked at this bust she had of Alexander Hamilton, that she looked at the bust with such longing that she looked like a woman that could never be satisfied.
Wow. You have read Ron Chernow's book?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of dialogue that Ron Chernow uses that is in Hamilton, or a lot of the wording he uses. Chernow uses the phrase diametrically opposed a lot, which shows up in Hamilton.
Yeah.
The treating of Jefferson is a big difference. But Ted, are you chomping? Do you want to get back
Well,
to
just to say,
76?
I want to go back to something earlier you said, where you said the film didn't kick off for you till later.
It's the slavery part. It's the plot of the thing is like the original sin of America and the original sin of the Constitutional Convention is the argument over slavery.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm misinterpreting how you mean kickoff. I want to say
not kickoff. Kickoff's not the right word.
Yeah, because I want to say I think the movie starts like gangbusters. I think the movie is a great opening, and if it didn't have that opening, it might be a different story. But I think that just sets the tone, grabs you right away. I think
it's that there's a long cinematic sequence. I should also say I've only seen I guess it's a 3 special edition as it's called, but the longest version I've only seen that twice. It's that long sequence at the end of the first hour where they never leave the room. It's entirely in the room for a long time.
Yeah, so there is one point where it's like the longest stretch in between two songs. It's about 30 minutes of just talking, and that's actually it was like kind of like a record of the longest stretch in between songs in a musical. But they just couldn't find one that actually worked in that spot, and so that's just how they kept it. But Shane, I think I know you're not as enthusiastic about the film.
I'm ish.
But that's fine. And that's kind of, I feel like people that watch it, especially like now, if you were just to put it on now, I feel like when I hear about people watching it, either they're like really into it or they're like, this is terrible. This is dumb. It's boring. And so I feel like it's a very divisive movie. Uh-huh. And I think also when you're watching it, like, especially like if you're watching it right now in 2021, there's a lot of, cultural things and baggage that, you can kind of, they're in the back of your mind as you're watching it, even if you were watching it like 10 years ago or something, that would be
fair enough. I think a lot of the appeal still is that there's, it really makes I think part of the mythologizing is this idea that they all agreed. And I like the dramatization of the fact that like they completely did not at a point in America where the whole endeavor could have fallen apart at any given point. Like that part, dramatizing that, yes. And that is the thing that like, it's interesting. And it's also part of currently, and I think consistently throughout my lifetime, the political argument on that I have not been interested in is the sanitization of like, oh no, we have these truths and the founding fathers all agreed and we should all agree on it. And by the way, it involves going back to the Constitution as the way it was whenever it was founded and no amendments or just amendment. Right. It's politicized in a really stupid or myopic way. And no, I mean, I the idea that politics has always been, or as soon as someone did bipartisanship, it created bipartisanship, like Washington arguing that maybe bipartisanship is the worst thing, or ending his second term saying maybe this should be not, or getting rid of the idea that the loser of a presidential election gets vice president, like that. Stuff like that seems interesting to me. That's the stuff I want dramatized.
Well, I mean, kind of to your point, then bringing it back to the movie, I think kind of that opening number really does set the tone of that these are human people, not those cardboard cutout, myth founders. These are like real men, and they're in a hot room and there are flies buzzing around and they can't agree on whether even the window should be open. And then John Adams comes running down in this really cool continuous shot from up in a bell tower in Independence Hall all the way down the stairs and then into the chamber where the Congress is. And he walks all around the room and the first musical number starts. But I think it does a good job of kind of saying, like, we're going to look at these people as, bickering men with their own opinions or maybe their, struggles of whether they need to follow their personal opinion or represent, the greater opinion of people from their colony. And I like that fact that it's telling the story of the Declaration of Independence and the vote for independence, but it's also showing you those struggles that were happening within the Congress.
Yeah, and it also has like a very nice ticking clock where like it starts a month in advance, and it's just and the counting off the days is a very distinct cinematic thing. Lonnie, we should mention also, going back to our episode on Father Goose and Cary Grant, this movie, the play itself and the screenplay is written by a familiar writer from that episode, Peter Stone.
Right, yeah, Peter Stone, who was the screenwriter for Father Goose as well as Charade, two great Cary Grant movies. He also wrote the book for the musical. He didn't write the music, but he actually just a very respected writer. He also did other musicals, other movies.
He kind of like went from after Cary Grant into a Broadway career, if I remember from the episode from the research I did on that one. But there's a certain wit to the movie. I admit there's a lot, like it feels like a stage bound wit that's in the movie. Like the movie's shot in a very backlotty way, like it's shot in the Warner's lot. Like the fountain from the song Leaves of Old Virginia is the same Warner's fountain that's used in the Friends opening. Like
yeah. So it was shot on the Columbia Ranch, and they created a replica of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and then Adams's ranch farm that they show in certain scenes with Abigail Adams was actually shot on the Disney Ranch. But okay. So it's a completely recreated, streets of Philadelphia. I guess it has that kind of backlot feel, but I think they did a pretty good job of, you could almost imagine it was like.
No, they did a pretty, I didn't mean to be so backhanded about it, but.
Yeah, no, but I could almost imagine like, if you go to like Colonial Williamsburg or something like that, it has almost the effect of like, oh, this is a little preserved part of the world.
But in my Washington D.C. trip, I actually bought a trifold hat, the trifold hat, and wore it around.
I'm picturing that. There's a part of me. When did this musical come out? The actual stage play.
1969.
Wow.
Okay.
But I would, about addressing the look of the film. I'm so enthralled by the personalities and the dialogue.
Fair enough.
That to me, the look of it didn't really factor into me. Whether I don't even think I have really sat down and said, well, that looks fake or not, because there's even a matte painting. When they did
I noticed the matte painting. The shot I noted is when what's the Delaware delegate Caesar when he whenever he kind of passes out, they do a really long take on that, and it's you can tell they kept the take in there because the acting was good, because you can see the camera shadow in that shot, but the acting's good, so they had to keep that.
I'm interested. What do you guys think that I just in terms of a musical, I always think. A successful musical has the ratio of songs that you can hum or sing out as you're walking out of the theater, or at the end of it, you can remember snippets of it, or you like it. There's a good ratio throughout the film, and then the ones that don't have them are just like clunkers. Sometimes I remember, I don't know, I maybe shoot myself in the foot here, but it seems like Carousel doesn't have that many good songs. It doesn't. I know there's some major songs in there. But anyway, I'm just saying, 1776 seems like, I think there's so many good songs, hummable, fun songs that get you through it.
I was just before I hit record on this episode, I was just telling Lonnie, you were singing these songs, and as long as I've known you now like 23 years, 22 years, it's the first time I've ever heard you sing. I think I've never heard you sing, and you were just like singing into the mic into a way where I could have recorded this and put it on the internet, and you did not care.
So yeah, but what do you think about that? Is that do you like the ratio of? Do you think that's a good? You like all the songs, or you think there's some clunkers in there, or does it all work, or how do you feel about the songs in the
Well, I think with any musical, it often, I mean, it will come back to kind of your personal taste and whether, because I definitely think that a lot of the songs have that hummable factor, but then, you also hear people who see it and say like, oh, the songs were all terrible. And so sometimes you can't account for taste, but I do think that they've done a nice job of balancing and of having variety of songs because it really takes you on like some emotional arcs with kind of fun songs where like Adams and Franklin and Jefferson are trying to decide who's going to write the Declaration, and it's very cute. Or you have the sort of romantic light song with Jefferson's wife where they're just sort of having a little frolic. But then you have the heavier stuff towards the second half of the show with the really show-stopping number, Molasses, Rum, and Slaves, which we can talk about maybe later if we want to get into more of plot points. And then also the number with the young soldier, Mama Look Sharp, which is another slow number. And those are, more emotional and heavy. And but I think all throughout there's songs that, will stick in your head for sure.
Yeah, I like this songs I like and hum and sing along to, but I'll have to loop in Hamilton at least one more time. There's a lot of songs where like it would be difficult for that to exist on its own, like just playing on the radio or someone doing a cover without changing it a lot, because the song will have many different movements or styles, and then it has to stop because now we're just going to talk dialogue in the middle of this song, and then we go back into the song. And so I feel like that's why, like, there's songs from West Side Story I never knew were from West Side Story until I watched the movie, because they're just so singable. They're in the culture. People have done covers of them.
Like you can sing Somewhere and it's just a love song, but you can't sing like The Egg or something.
Yeah, you can sing But Mr. Adams. Where it's like, I love that song's my favorite song in the whole movie. And then like it's really jaunty and you're singing along, and then Adams and Jefferson stop and Adams quotes Jefferson one of his writings and they just talk for a while, and then Jefferson goes back into singing Damn You, Mr. Adams.
Yeah, Philadelphia. Oh,
we did get the singing on and recorded.
But yeah, that's a great song. I mean, I think like I said, it gets you. It's a good pace, and they up and down, and they get you through it. I think in a wonderful way that I really enjoy it. I think it's people are missing out because I don't know why. It seems so undiscovered. It's so
I think to Lonnie's point, it's so much of this subjectivity. Like, I guess if you're saying distinctly, do I hum this song afterwards? But I totally hear AJ's point. Like, there's so many times like I come back to a musical that I'm completely unfamiliar with, and during a Bob Fosse episode, or so many songs from Sweet Charity came up that I was like, I had no clue. I was, besides being completely unfamiliar with Sweet Charity in general. One song I do want to talk about from 1776, which was my first viewing, was, I wouldn't say like I had any favorites in terms of hummability or musicality, but the song from a content standpoint, going back to our earlier point about I wanted to see that like there was like parallels between then and now, is the song that was cut out of the theatrical, or one of the main ones that supposedly Nixon wanted cut out and talked to Jack Warner about it.
Cool, Considerate Men. Well, that is the song that was cut from the theatrical version because Jack Warner showed the movie to Richard Nixon, and
at the White House, right?
Yeah, there was a big screening at the White House and the cast was there. And well, this is just a funny story, but Howard Da Silva, who plays Benjamin Franklin, was a blacklisted actor. He had very left-leaning political views through his whole life, and he went to the screening at the White House, and then supposedly immediately after, he joined in a protest outside against the Vietnam War to just kind of like cleanse his soul there from having to go have an audience with Richard Nixon. But yeah, so that was a suggestion by Nixon that they should cut that. And I think a lot of people kind of listen to that number and feel that it's specifically speaking about the conservative Republican political view, and thinking that it's it's being critical of that, and so that makes it more political, anti-conservative sort of song. Which
I don't. I mean, like, it's certainly open to interpretation, but it's this great song that humanizes the opposite point of view.
Right.
And Dickinson.
It's sung by John Dickinson, who is the main opposition to John Adams in the film, as Adams is for independence and Dickinson is against independence. Yes. And this is his one big number, kind of explaining his point of view and the point of view of those who are not for independence.
The mainly property owners who are saying it was the big political argument in the movie.
Yeah, it really humanize, like, they're not the bad guys, like, and Dickinson is the antagonist, but I wouldn't call him the villain of the movie, and this song explains his point of view.
The antagonism feels very political, theatrical, and argumentative.
And they're in the 1776, the movie, Dickinson is played up as a loyalist. In real life, his opposition to war came more from his Quaker background. But all of the Southerners they would lean towards independence, but they didn't think they could win, so why bother? And that is lyrics in the music. If we can't win, why should we begin? And they never act rationally. They act conservatively. Right? Like, not like capital C political conservatism, but they want to wait. They're cool, considerate men. They consider everything before they act. They hang to the rear, like Adams tells Dickinson, and when he's complaining about you cool, considerate men. The David McCullough's book, John Adams, has a quote from Caesar Rodney complaining about the cool, considerate men of the South.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and AJ, didn't Dickinson join the army after
he did
his time time after Congress? So I mean,
he
joined
did.
The army.
He has a great final moment in this movie, which is well deserved and well played. In real life, Adams and Franklin were able to convince him to just not come to the vote.
Yeah,
and then the Pennsylvania delegation would be majority for independence, and they could vote unanimously. And then he immediately joined the army to defend his home. So he was like I don't think we'll win this fight. I think it's braving the storm in a skiff of paper is what he says. And I think that line's in the movie too.
Yeah.
But if we were going to fight, then we'll fight. I don't think we'll win, but I will join in.
Yeah, I just want to give the actor who plays Dickinson is named Donald Madden, and this was the only movie he actually made. He made some TV and did theater, but he died about 10 years after this movie, so he didn't have a very long career. He died young, but I think he gives a really great performance, and I just wanted to mention his name.
Yeah, I think he steals the movie, frankly.
Yeah.
And he's the perfect, in real life, if you've watched the John Adams miniseries, anyone here or listening, the portrayal of Dickinson in there is much more accurate. He was a very frail, ashen, sickly man. People always thought he was going to die because he just looked so ill all the time. but he was very, very popular. And in the John Adams miniseries, that's conveyed by what episode 2 starts with. Everyone's at a dinner party and they're just lapping up everything Dickinson says, and John Adams is stewing at his end of the table. But here, they go a different, dramatic, more immediate way.
Yeah, he's much more sort of.
He's
suave,
if Michael York was a badass, right? Like he comes out of the new delegate from Georgia is talking to Caesar Rodney, who's very much for independence. He comes out of his carriage, says like, "When you're done converting the man to independency, Caesar, surely you'll let the opposition have a say."
Yeah, it's just a very different portrayal, but very charismatic. And I think that's what you need to kind of be the leader of the opposition.
Yeah, he's a towering figure, like to either change his opinion or get people to align with yourself or with Adams against him. Seems like this really Herculean task, and the movie does a great job by making Dickinson this very tall, suave, charming person.
And they're probably, and just, for the sake of a narrative, dramatic tropes, you want to kind of have a bad guy, good guy, dramatic. Yeah. And unfortunately, probably most people that's how they would approach it but if you do your homework or you know some of history, that it's not that, like you said, antagonist is a better word than outright villain.
The last thing I wanted to mention about the song is there's a lyric in there, never to the left, and the left-right divide is demarcated by the French Revolution, which hasn't happened yet, where the French Senate, where those who wanted progress for progress' sake were on the left side of the aisle, and those who wanted to consolidate everything were on the right side of the aisle.
Yeah, they co-opted that for the film.
Yeah, and everything else has co-opted it since. So, but
that's something people like to point out is like, that's anachronistic or whatever.
Yeah, but also they're just singing about their dance.
Yeah,
they're doing their dance to the right, never to the left. And Dickinson stands still, always to the right. Mr. Handclock, you're a man of property. Won't you join us in our minuet? And they're doing a minuet to the right.
Yeah.
I told my dad I was doing this episode, and I thought my dad was a huge fan of this episode or this movie. I don't know why the hell I ever thought that, because my dad's one of those people who hates every single musical he's ever seen, because his first question whenever he sees a musical is, "Wait, I don't. Why are they bursting the song? Why are they
yeah. Yeah, it's yeah. So. But I had lunch with a friend earlier. I said, when you watch them, when you really understand and look at a musical, and you go, wait a minute, because they break out the song, anything goes. You have imagination. You can do anything in this.
It's such inherently the most cinematic medium, which I guess why like some of these like stage bound musicals from this era are just a little. They're stage bound to me. Like I just
and you guys used to this much more than I have. I noticed this time around that there's not they're playing up the various styles of how you can do songs, because I can sit down all of a sudden at one point the entire Congress freezes. And as John continues, so that's a little trope that you can see in different.
But that seems like a stage trope.
But it's
even like the talking to the wife stuff seemed like a lighting cue on a stage, even though they do it in a slightly cinematic way.
And then you have the song with your two people singing from different geographical locations.
Yeah,
that's another trope. And then what was the other one I was thinking of? The lighting, like with molasses and rum. How the lighting all of a sudden is, so it's so fun because you can play you can do these different. You don't have to stay consistent with your musical numbers and your staging. You can play it up almost however you want to do it. That works best for the song, obviously.
Yeah, it kind of goes from a more realistic feeling, like when they are singing with Martha Jefferson out in the little garden, and they're just all sort of there. Really, it's like real, but then you have the more fantasy sequences where Adams and his wife are singing to each other, and it's really letters that they're writing, but it's as if they're, actually talking to each other from, across the state lines. And on stage, that would just be Abigail standing on one part of the stage and John standing in another part of the stage, and the two people just, separated by empty stage. But in the movie, they were able to do some fantasy elements where they start out apart, and then eventually you see them together, walking together and singing the song, which is something that maybe necessarily they wouldn't do on stage. So it's kind of using the movie to enhance the material.
I also noticed the some of the favorite songs in musicals are the very self-egotistical songs. In Camelot, you got when Franco Nero says "San what," that
Yes.
great number. And then I was thinking about Richard Henry Lee. For some reason this struck me. This is the San Moi song in this one, where he's how wonderful he is, and then convince, of course, and John and Ben have to say, yes, you're very,
Those seem like very performative based stuff that works on stage. One tiny point cinematically I want to bring up to you, Ted. It was a point of confusion, which I really only had the second viewing, but there was a brief time watching the movie till like I got convinced from away from the middle initial, but this movie's directed by Peter Hunt. I thought this movie was directed by the Peter Hunt of the Bond movies and On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's initial away. It's just one initial away.
They had to put the initial in there probably because
they both. Peter Hunt from the Bond movies has a career that doesn't. When you look him up on IMDb, they weirdly have similar places. Although this Peter Hunt mostly worked in TV and seemed like he was good with actors, so I assumed he had stage background.
He did a lot of stage work, and then in the 80s he did a lot of TV.
Initials is the difference between There Will Be Blood and Alien versus Predator.
It's the difference between Magnolia and the Event Horizon director's cut.
Yeah.
Other little tidbits I like of this is you get the snare drum every time you get George Washington letters.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they even vary that up sometimes. Like even though I heard I was reading I have a book on it compares the accuracy of movies and history, and they had a chapter in 1776, and it said that the dispatches from Washington were not that bad to suppressing, probably because I think the major defeat comes after the Declaration, doesn't it? Is it right, AJ? It wasn't. I mean, they were doing okay, sort of.
It was around that time, like in the summer, when they had to evacuate New York, when the song "Right Hand Man" from Hamilton, where they get chased out of New York and we got to run to Harlem quick, we got to abandon ship, happens around then, and Washington read the Declaration to his men, and that pumped them up and got them to agree to stay on till the end of the year when their enlistments would run out. And that's when they did the Christmas Day, Christmas night run, crossing the Delaware to surprise attack people in Trenton. But yeah, it was kind of around the time.
Right.
Yeah.
But they were able to mine a lot of humor, but by the suspensions being on the kind of on the bummer side. I love there were different phrases that repeat throughout the film, like "good God" and "ditto" and "courteously," "abstain," "till then." The "sweet Jesus" that got repeated several times.
I want to sneak this in here just because this struck me as both viewings as a big Aaron Sorkin fan. I don't know if I've talked to you guys about this, but there's this thing called Sorkinisms where Aaron Sorkin has a tendency to plagiarize himself and repeat the same ones. There's a great series of videos.
I could have been doing this whole time.
There's a series of videos on YouTube. You can look it up. I think they're up to Sorkinisms 4, but one of the Sorkinisms he stole from this movie. At one point, I think Adam says Earth was created in Adam says Earth was only created in 7 days, and Jefferson responds to him, "The history books will have to tell us how you did it."
Yeah, he says so. Yeah, Adam says, the world was created in 7 days, and Jefferson says, "And one day, John, you'll have to tell us how you did it."
Thank you, Lonnie. That was the actual quote, and I wrote it down wrong.
Interesting thing about that scene that I never noticed until we watched it with the director's commentary was Franklin and Adams go to Jefferson's apartment to see his progress on the Declaration, and Adams goes right to chastising them for taking so long, and Benjamin Franklin in the background goes and lays down on Jefferson's bed and goes right to sleep.
Because he's sleeping in the Congress most of the time.
I love
he really did sleep in Congress. That is accurate.
And I also love Franklin's quote: "The history books will clean it up. Anything they this, I guess this musical does in its own way."
That I wrote that line down, misread it.
But I feel like that, history has like cleaned it up. But this musical and certain other, like if you actually read, the history books, like David McCullough and John Meacham, and even Hamilton and Ron Chernow's history books, they'll like let it out, like, hey, like these guys were real people, and Washington wanted to be a general, a prestigious general, and then he just wanted to go home. He didn't want to do any of this politics stuff. John Adams wanted to be a lawyer and a farmer. He was obnoxious and disliked, and he did not like anybody else. Like he really was. And he was friendly with Franklin, and then the longer they were friends, he grew to not like Franklin, and the same with Jefferson. So that with Jefferson, that was reciprocal because of their political beliefs. And in 1776, like it's one of these movies, like it's rated G or PG, and I put it on one day at the. I think I was still at Blockbuster at the time, and I was like, "Oh my god, a movie made before 1995! I have to throw this on." So I put it on, and yeah, there's no like violence or anything, no strong swears, but they talk about sex so much, and they're like they talk about whores all the time, and they say like damn and goddamn and shit. Like they say the swears that are like somehow worse than straight up F-bombs.
They talk about their balls a lot too.
Yeah, and to me this makes them like, even though they are like singing and they're dressed up like the statues and the paintings, they come off as silly, which lets them be human.
Right.
And I can relate to all of them, even Franklin, who's like so cool and wise, and Jefferson, who's so like, emo and really like I'm just in the corner, like leave me alone, but I'm also like super good at writing. And Adams, who's just like, why can't you see things the way I see things? I can relate to all of them.
You brought up John Meacham, AJ. Like, what are your favorite historical versions from the Revolution? What are the books you like from the Revolution?
I at one point, I read Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton, which was recommended to me when it debuted from a friend of mine who was really into Alexander Hamilton her whole life. And then at some point there was this musical about Alexander Hamilton, and then everyone else caught up. So it was like, okay, I'll read this. And that led me to Ron Chernow's biography of George Washington. Chernow's really great at humanizing the characters, right? The people, but he kind of turns them into characters, which lets them be people again. And you see they're like easily annoyed by things, and they have their favorite things and their habits and their various beliefs. Some would you agree with, and some like, okay, that's appropriate for the time, but they're not now. So yeah, Chernow is great. David McCullough is a really good writer. His biography of John Adams is really entertaining, and it reads quick, and it reads almost like a thriller at certain points. John Meacham is also another guy, his biography of Jefferson's called The Art of Power. And all of these guys, they don't shy away from the, more unsavory parts, I don't want to say like politically correct, but the stuff that like, if you were writing the PR press release of their biographies, you would hide this stuff away. Like it's all out there. John Meacham has written a lot of history books. I would recommend his writings.
I've come across John Meacham started a few podcasts recently, and I remember him from Real Time. He's always a good host on Real Time. I started reading and didn't get too far into it. This book by Thomas E. Ricks, who's he's a Pulitzer Prize winner who is a military writer, and he wrote this book about after his response to like when Trump got elected, like what does American principles mean? It's called First Principles, and I gave up on it after a few pages, but I was reading it the last few weeks, and I really do want a good book about figuring out exactly what, like every time I rewatch Hamilton, I always want to read the papers, the constitutional,
the Federalist Papers.
Yes, the Federalist Papers.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure AJ can speak more thoroughly on this, but I love the fact that these I've always wanted to make the definitive list of founding fathers, who is exactly in the group, and how they and the chemistry between all of them, and exactly, and I was thinking how it'd been interesting if they had maybe worked in Samuel Adams into this movie and see the two cousins, because I think they were on the same delegate, right? They were the same. But Sam doesn't factor in at all here in the movie.
They chose not to make him a character in the play.
David Mccullough's biography, which I reread the chapter on the Declaration last night because it's pretty concise there. Mccullough gets right into the action, if you will. Uh-huh. He mentions that Samuel Adams rarely ever spoke up in Congress, that John Adams was the leader of the Massachusetts delegation doing all of the debating and speaking. So dramatically, you can see why, we won't include Samuel Adams. And then also now John Adams is totally alone on his delegation, right? He's got to convince the other states.
Right.
But do you think, let's do another Hamilton. Is Aaron Burr, is he a villain? Is he a bad guy? Or is he is he actually a founding father?
It's like there's a good, of course there's a good argument that he is a founder, fought in the Revolution and early senator. I think he is a villain, not even because he killed Alexander Hamilton. But reading Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton, the stuff that made me shake my head that Aaron Burr did, no, what? This guy is terrible. Or he created a rival bank to the National Bank, the Federal Bank, under the guise of establishing a water company for New York. Yeah. It was going to be a water company, and he collected money, and poor people were going to get water now. And then it turns out, it's a private rival bank to the Bank of the United States. And what? What the?
Yeah.
You stole water from people?
Burr did some scummy stuff, maybe, even if not every founding father was a perfect person, or, you can certainly find fault in what they did. But I think he was definitely more a self-interested person who was interested in getting ahead for his own gain, more than necessarily having the convictions of, ideals that some of the other people
part of the arc when I was watching Hamilton, just finishing up today, was that when he first comes on, he says talk less, smile more. It goes basic storytelling. You beginning of that, you agree with them, yes, Hamilton, talk less, smile more. Then you get to the end, and you that's where the parallels start to feel like a politician for politician's sake, who is saying what he wants to keep power, to be in the room where it happens, and and he doesn't want to get behind anything or really say anything. And that's where it started. The parallels of the current dissatisfying politicians come for me on that.
Yeah, and another founding father, that's total tragic, totally. Now he's an actual description of somebody is Benedick Arnold. I thought that was because what intrigues me about him is he was he was a really good general. He was a hero. He was actual flat out
won
hero.
the Battle of Saratoga, which is why the French agreed to ally with the United States and sent us their navy, and why we won the war, because he won the Battle of Saratoga, but all the credit went to Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, and he got a little bitter about that.
Yeah, just a little.
Also, he was married to a British woman with strong loyalist ties.
Yeah. So I'm always drawn to the more of the outcasts of the group, I guess.
Yeah, like I've wanted to read. There's two biographies of Aaron Burr. One's called Fallen Founder, and the other's called The Tragedy of Aaron Burr. But it's like, I don't know if I want to spend that much time reading about those guys. The same with Benedict Arnold. Interesting, not to take your podcast political, we can steer right away from it.
Go for it.
But Fort Arnold was established, right, in honor of Revolutionary War hero Fort Arnold. And then he betrayed the country. So we changed the name of Fort Arnold to West Point. That's why the military academy is called West Point, not Fort Arnold.
Wow.
AJ, I want to ask you, maybe you'd be the person to talk to about this. This comes up in 1776 a bunch, where the reason we won the war is Adams even used the word spirit, I think, at one, or someone uses the term spirit, and someone responds to him with like, well, why didn't I think of that? Like, and I've always thought the historical, not really knowing anything about this, was that it was a typical guerrilla war thing where the major power never knew the right tactics and never put all its resources into it. And what is the real reason we won the Revolutionary War?
Well, being just a stay-at-home dad that likes to read history books. One of my teachers, my favorite teacher, who was a history teacher, always said that there's a strong correlation to why the United States lost Vietnam and why Great Britain lost the American Revolution, because we used guerrilla tactics.
That was what I was going with, the guerrilla comparison, yeah.
And we weren't really fighting the NBA, we were fighting the Viet Cong in Vietnam. And that kind of makes sense. One of the things that, like, one Viet Cong general told Westmoreland during the peace talks, when Westmoreland was bitter, and he said, we outmatched you on the battlefield every time. And the Vietnamese representative said, that is true, but it is also irrelevant. George Washington lost more battles than he won, but he won the important battles. He won Yorktown, and he won Yorktown because he agreed to go with the French strategy of turning it into a siege. And the French had, experience doing siege warfare, and they could bring in their navy. And it's, to me, that song, The Battle of Yorktown and Hamilton, is so moving because everything comes together. All these pieces and people come together, and it's teamwork. And I get so moved and overwhelmed. And 1776 to me is about teamwork. We have to come together. You need John Adams spurring everyone on, but you need Franklin to kind of back him off and to use a lighter touch. You need Jefferson's, wonderful prose. You need the Scottish delegate from Delaware to go grab the old sick delegate from Delaware, Caesar Rodney, to bring him back
just in time for the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of bringing it back to 1776, like one of the things that I like about it is kind of giving all these different founders who aren't as known, who aren't the marquee names, Franklin, Adams, Jefferson, and kind of giving them some important moments throughout just to kind of highlight that, yeah, there were a lot of people here and they all had a part to play. And like, for example, John Hancock, who's the president of the Continental Congress, who's, presiding over the meetings, he, at one point, Dickinson says that in order that the vote for independence should have to be unanimous, which at first they were just going to vote. And if they had a majority, then that would be the way the vote went. But Dickinson moved for it to be unanimous. And so then John Hancock had to make a decision as the president of the Senate, like a tie-breaking decision, to say, yes, we should vote. It should be unanimous because we all have to be in on this thing. If we're going to have a rebellion, a revolution, we all need to be as one. And, his beliefs were that they should have a revolution, but he knew that for the good of the group, they were all going to have to agree on that. So he could have just said, let's go ahead, and it doesn't have to be unanimous, and just do what I want, further what I want. But he kind of makes that selfless decision. And there's little moments like that throughout, with all the different delegates having kind of their...
It's like the arc of the Georgia delegate too, where he's just like, I know what my constituents want.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Georgia delegate gets to Congress and realizes he doesn't know how to be a politician. Did the people elect me to use my judgment, or should I go back and check with them before I vote? Which is, you can have that debate, like.
And that character is a great character for the structure of the musical, the movie, because he's like us almost. He's this sort of new person who just arrives on the scene, and so he has to be introduced to everyone and kind of get the lay of the land.
Like an audience surrogate.
So he's kind of an audience surrogate at first, of kind of being like, okay, I don't know anything, and now explain to me what's going on, who everybody is, and I'm gonna just take it all in and kind of come to my own conclusions.
I like what AJ said about teamwork. It all came together in Yorktown, and here in the movie, again, the teamwork, and the fact that you get to see them all, and maybe they all don't get along, but I think the respect, you get the feeling that the respect's there, that they know they have an important job to do, and all these guys are smart guys. There's not, they're not. It's not like just a stupid, idiot in there or whatever, and they have to come together and figure this out. And I think teamwork is a really good term for that. Well, and then to see that in action, because we have a tendency just to kind of like have a vague mythic version of this thing.
Well, the thing that I always think of with the founding fathers in a positive turn of someone who like would tend to like maybe want to really deep into it is like, it always seems like the apotheosis of the Age of Reason. It's just like it's when the Renaissance really kicked into a political realm of how to organize society, and reason as we know it at least 300 years ago finally kicked in, and the government that's going to take over the world for the next 200 years, a bunch of people who are influenced by this or reading into this were just like, we're going to be in a reason of power, or being, but one big difference I did want to talk about between Hamilton and 1776 when I watched it again was one key point in Hamilton. I think it's during the first kind of rap battle between Hamilton and Jefferson. Hamilton just distinguishes the difference between these two, between 1776 and Hamilton. And it's basically, he says to Jefferson, you weren't in the war. Like, none of these people in 1776 had to do with the war. They talked about the war. They got missives from the war. But Hamilton was about a lot of people that were involved with the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, well, and they kind of say it during the movie, like there was fighting going on, but they hadn't sort of officially declared war. And one of them, I think this happens in the movie when somebody's like, we are at war. Like, this is happening. We need to just go ahead.
I think Adam says it at some point.
Declare. Because and like at that point, only certain colonies were being affected by it, like New England and New York had already gotten, all of been hammered by, the British, and some of those southern colonies, it hadn't reached down there yet. And so they're like, we can take our time. Why do we have to, jump into things? And, up in Boston, they're like, we're already at war. Like, we can't take this anymore. So in some ways, the fighting part hadn't started for some of these people.
Sure. That makes sense.
One thing that Cool Considerate Men number goes right into the Mama Look Sharp number. And so you get, everyone stunts, assumedly is for American independence watching this movie. So it's all like a foregone conclusion. So like, where's the drama? And one thing I love about 1776 is that it makes the American Revolution not certain. You don't know that it's going to happen. And at the end, you really think it's not going to happen. And the first real inklings of that are Cool Considerate Men, where you get the rational, calm, logical explanation for why you would oppose American independence. And then right after, the soldier comes in and he sings about being, like just wanting to go home. The war is terrible. I just want to go home. And for a long time, I didn't like that song because to me, I thought of that as the Vietnam song. Knowing that this young kid who doesn't look like he could be there would be a drawing or an etching of him, right?
He looks like he could be a contemporary from the 60s or 70s.
Yeah, comes in and sings just about how terrible war is and about how like everyone just wants to go home to their mothers. Like mothers can't find their kids.
He's a young Revolutionary War soldier that happens to be a heroin addict too.
Yeah, and he sings that to the secretary and the janitor, and it's like the real people that have to do the real work. And then in the theater, in the stage show, that's where Act 1 ends. And to me, that's like a real heavy punch of like, this is like gonna be not fun, guys. It's gonna be like serious. It's gonna be bad if we do this, but maybe we have to, but it's going to be bad. Maybe we'll win and everything will be great, but first it's going to get really bad.
That's the non-rousing point.
And well, that's kind of how it ends too. To jump to the end of ends with the signing of the Declaration, and then this really very powerful moment where each delegate goes up and signs, and there's the score is just
it is not a rousing moment. That is a moment I marked down. Like the ending. The ending does always work.
So you hear the bell, the bell and the bell tower ringing, and then the music kind of builds, but it's just a single tone. It's one note that's just kind of different, instruments or whatever coming in, and just kind of sustaining this note as the bell rings every time a new person comes up, and then they all sort of take their place and composed into what looks like it could be, a painting. They kind of all take poses as
they all kind of turn into like parchment at that point. They literally dissolve kind of look into parchment.
As if they're posed in a painting to commemorate the signing, but it's such a solemn moment, and it's just makes that point of like, this is what we've wanted, but now we have to actually fight a war, and we don't know what's going to happen. And it's that moment of, we have crossed the Rubicon, the die is cast, whatever, like no turning back. And they all kind of have to sit in it and think about it. And to me, that's just always a very powerful moment. You really feel the gravity of, that decision.
I think what you said earlier, I think that's maybe the magic of this movie. You guys have watched it more than I have, but you're right. Every time I sit down to watch it, I get caught up. Are they going to work it out? Because it's really.
You see the calendar. They tear the pages off the calendar, and you see the date, and I'm like, July 2nd. They'll never make it.
That's a nice. They did an interesting montage with those last pages, but I just you're right. I get caught up, so like, okay, here comes the South. They're gonna start, not want to work this out, and we're gonna tear this section out of the of the writings and stuff. So I think that's a really good point that makes this movie so watchable and rewatchable. And it's sorry that people can't get into it. That don't like it, or let the music stop them. Or
no, it's. Do we want to get to the point that I was talking about earlier, where the movie really, really kicks in for me and engages?
Sure.
The slavery.
What is that moment?
It really is when they start debating slavery and the slavery passage, and it was.
Sure. Yeah.
And I mean, the writing gets really, to me, very incisive. There's one point at the end where when Adams kind of starts to realize he has to give it up. I think Adams says this line where he says, posterity will never forgive us. And it's such a really, it is so, for a concise line that describes the last 245 years of American history, like, it's pretty chillingly spot on to me. Because slavery is the original sin of America.
Yeah, and this, I feel like the show isn't trying to necessarily get fully into the issue of slavery, but it doesn't also shy away from discussing it. And
yeah, it seems like for a show that's all about the politics and the give and take and about the bureaucracy and all the stuff they have to like sacrifice and all these ideas that they want, and you're watching this for a movie that takes place 200 years ago, and you're just like, this is silly. Open the windows, close the windows. It doesn't fucking matter. Then you get to a point where you're just like, oh, this is the thing that mattered that they gave in on, and it mattered. And would they, if they hadn't given on, what would have happened? Was the horse trading worth it? Like, that's the drama to me. That's where the movie really kicks in for me.
That's when the South walks out on John Adams, my like heart always drops, and I think like it's not going to happen. Like, how is it that it happened? But how is it's not going to happen?
Do you feel that way every time you watch it?
Yeah, every time. I'm like, my heart sinks. Like, the South walked out, but you can't give in on slavery, but it doesn't happen if we don't. And Franklin, I didn't write down the quote, but Franklin chides Adams, like, how dare you, risk everything that we have worked for. If we don't do this, nothing else matters. That he doesn't say the slavery issue doesn't matter if we don't do this, but that's implied. We have to do this first, or else nothing matters.
And AJ, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's Franklin at the Constitutional Congress that speaks up against slavery big time when they are putting the Constitution together, right?
That I do believe it was they had to go into like subcommittee to talk about that issue. Franklin was a part of it. And then what they came out with was the 3/5 compromise.
Yeah, right. But I remember, I just think that's interesting that what you said about Franklin saying in the 1776, because I think he goes, we got to do this to get this thing, and then he hopefully, or maybe he's already thinking ahead that we can work on it down the road.
At that point in his life, Franklin had become an abolitionist, like not just against slavery, but like an abolitionist. And this, when he says like, how dare you, sir, I founded the first abolitionist society on this continent, that he actually did that after the events of 1776. But yeah, by the time the Constitutional Convention comes around, he would have been very firmly an abolitionist at this point. At one time, he did own slaves and dealt in the slave trade early in his life, and I don't believe at this point he had any slaves.
But I do think that song that is sung by the South Carolina delegate
Rutledge,
played by John Mccullough.
Yeah, Northern Exposure.
Yeah. Great actor, still alive, 90 years old, still just did a one-man show. But anyway, it's a very long theatrical career, but I think he gives a great performance, and he just is kind of like goes there during this song, and it starts to get almost like he's up to almost the brink of, he is almost getting manic, and then someone kind of pulls him back, and it's like, and pulls everybody back in. But it's a song where he's saying, about the triangle trade, and basically saying, hey, we're all complicit in slavery. Like, we have slaves on our plantations, but
you buy the goods they make.
You buy the goods they make, and you profit from it as well. Which I think is just also important to have there, just to kind of acknowledge, like, we're not saying good, bad people. They all had some, aspects, it was all tied together, and we can't get away from it. But, not that this show is really delving into that topic, but I like that at least it puts it in there.
Acknowledges it. Acknowledges the complexity in the gray area.
Right. Right.
AJ, I want to ask about the, you said you watched the theatrical cut first of this. There's like a half-hour difference between the theatrical cut and what's now on the Blu-ray, which is what I watched.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice the difference, but when I saw the two versions, because I saw them so far apart. But yeah, the theatrical cut's like 2 hours 20 minutes, and the director's cut is a full like 2 hours 45 minutes. So there's a lot restored to it, and a lot of the cuts made were really arbitrary, aside from the Nixon mandated cut.
Yeah, and then there's just certain like intros into musical numbers. We listened to the commentary, which has the director and the writer, Peter Hunt and Peter Stone, talking, and they were mentioning different moments that got cut, and it was weird, like little bits of dialogue right before a musical number, and you think like, well, why would they cut that? Because it actually sets up something, in the scene or whatever. It was some odd things, like so John and Abigail have their back and forth correspondence, and there's one part, he's talking to her, and she's like, oh, you listed all my faults in your last letter. And they kind of go over it. And then he said, oh, and I said,
pigeon-toed.
And she says, oh, well, you got me there, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that moment was cut. And then later at the end, there's a callback where they have kind of the reverse conversation where John is like, oh, well, yes, you got me there. You said a fault of mine. And so when you cut out the first part, the callback doesn't really call back to anything anymore. So that's one of the that's an example of like something that got cut.
Yeah, the scene where they all, there's a fire somewhere else in Philadelphia. So they all like run outside because they all want to get out of Congress, and they go help put out the fire. And then at that moment is when Richard Henry Lee rides back into Philadelphia with the authority to submit the resolution for independence. And then they all walk into Congress together. And that was cut out, and it was cut right where they all walk back into Congress together. So in the theatrical version, just every member of Congress
just walks in
to an empty room with no explanation as to why they all weren't there to begin with.
Did you watch? What did you just watch? The Blu-ray or the DVD?
The DVD. I only found out last night that the Blu-ray version has apparently even more restored footage, like a couple more minutes, and it has a commentary with William Daniels.
Yeah, and I couldn't get my hands on the Blu-ray. I watched the DVD as well, and I was surprised the intermission wasn't on the DVD. So I'm thinking they might have also put the intermission back on the Blu-ray, because, let me back up a little bit. I think when they first put it out in home video, it was a full-screen VHS and a full-screen Laserdisc, and it was the theatrical cuts. Then they came out with this super widescreen edition, and that's when they started putting the footage back into it, even to the extent where they couldn't. I forgot what year they did this special Laserdisc, but they put black and white footage in just to put it in. They had a black and white work print, but they didn't have the budget or the facilities to fix it up. And then the DVD comes along and add all the. I think they found that black and white footage, or they fixed it up, or whatever they did to it. But they dropped the intermission out, I guess, because this Laserdisc has intermission in it.
I remembered an intermission what I saw last night.
So I think the Blu-ray helps it get up to 3 hours long because of the intermission and all the trims. So there's a theatrical cut and 3 different home video versions of it. So it's
and the only little what I saw deterioration of quality weirdly comes in the flash whenever whenever they would talk to the wives, basically, whenever they would do the processing effect with that was the only time there was a deterioration of quality of film.
And I guess you notice on the DVD, they had some of the test screen, they had some of the audition screenings.
Yeah, the special feature.
Right, I think there's even more of those on the Blu-ray. They found some more of those. So I just, like I said, if you saw how I archive stuff, stacks and stacks and stacks everywhere. Shane knows. I couldn't find the Blu-ray. I unfortunately, but maybe down the road we'll address exactly the differences there.
Ted Haycraft, the man who buys a stack of what he wants to eventually watch one day, the stack that will always be unwatched.
So. But yeah, I wanted to fire up the Laserdisc and see I look at the actual.
Do you have your Laserdisc connected?
I don't have it. I don't have it connected.
That's my dream, is to have a Laserdisc connected to one of my TVs.
But yeah, I remember watching. Though I did watch it back in the day on Laserdisc, and it goes to black and white work print, but they fixed it all up now. So it looks beautiful, guys. Everybody out there, don't be afraid. It's a great. It all looks.
Everyone out there who's going to want to maybe watch the Laserdisc, you can watch the Laserdisc and ignore the DVD and the Blu-ray.
No, I'm saying don't. There's no black and white in it anymore.
Okay. I think to start to wind down, I don't know. I mean, before we came on, we started talking about all our plans for July 4th. I guess I want to ask everybody, how much of a holiday do you guys make of it? How much of a celebration is it to you guys?
How much does it mean to you? More and more of a holiday to me as I've gotten older. I mean, I couldn't have cared when I was younger in my 20s, which were how long ago now. But I've worked retail jobs my whole life, which means you work every major holiday, and then people come in and buy stuff and they make you work on a holiday, and you're like, fuck you, you're here buying stuff on the holiday, man. You're why I have to be here. But really,
theater people will represent. Yeah, I hear you.
But really, I say oh, have a good day or whatever. But I didn't care if it was 4th of July. People would ask, is the Gap going to be open on 4th of July? I'm like, yeah, why the fuck would we be closed? But as I've gotten older, maybe it's because I've just gotten more into history now that after I got out of college, I had time to actually read the history books that I was supposed to read in college, but I couldn't because of all the other classes I had to take.
Now that you're getting older and you're a dad, you're becoming more interested in history and war.
Yeah,
you're about to go to World War II fighters here soon enough.
Yeah, so it's become more meaningful to me as I go on, or just a bigger deal is a day. We're gonna do something together on this day because it's a special day.
It is a holiday that I like. It's maybe one of my favorite ones. This isn't a political podcast, but I consider myself a patriotic person, and I think patriotism and the word patriotic has kind of been co-opted by certain political conservative leanings, and I don't think that that's correct. I think that anybody can be patriotic, even if you're right or left, but watching, getting teared up because I think about this movie and the momentous thing that it took to establish the United States, and as someone who was born here and is proud to be an American, it is very moving to me to watch it. And so that's why it's a holiday that I like, but I also like that we grill hamburgers and eat watermelon and whatever. As far as a food-based holiday, I like the food a little bit better than Thanksgiving. So, so it can be a fun holiday as well.
Well, Thanksgiving ties into colonial period too. There, so
Right.
With the same level of like dubious gray area.
Maybe even more so than 4th of July.
But I do. Somebody just pointed this out to me not too long ago, that it's become, everything's become so commercialized, and it just goes down to the watch the fireworks and drink beer and get drunk and act stupid and set houses on fire and because of
now you're talking from a
because the sparkler went out of control,
Evansville perspective,
right? But somebody says it's not 4th of July, it's Independence Day, but everybody calls it 4th of July or July 4th. If the holiday is technically officially a Independence Day, right?
Okay.
So I think I almost need to. It'd be kind of nice to get back to using that more, as opposed to just this. I think that ties. It's the laziness of Americans, and the excuse just to have a day off and drink beer and. But I remember thinking throughout all these decades, I would get. I'm with you about the patriotic. I would think about it. Let's really think about what this day represents.
Yeah.
And I do, but I would end up working or not doing, or go to my family get together. But it's hardly anybody ever brings up, and that's why I love watching this movie over and over again, because it kind of it makes me not overthink. What am I trying to say? I'm not trying to forget about this. I still marvel. My dad is a history buff, and I love history, and we sit there and we before he passed away, every so often we'd just go, how did they win the war? How did we do this? How do these guys get together and get this accomplished? And so it's always been in the back of my mind. And so it just means something to me.
I think, Lonnie, to your point earlier about not wanting to politicize this, and the fact that someone has politicized the sincerity of patriotism, and that from a lot of my life it's feel like there's a grossness to the jingoism and the rah-rah-rah-ism, and that the 4th of July sometimes has become too much of a moratorium of how I feel about things currently. And so for since 2016 after, it was a little rough, especially. But at the same time, I was just telling my dad the other day that one of my first memories is being downtown during the fireworks, and I was asking if he remembered this, and he kind of chuckled, but I was like, I remember I thought the fireworks were going to fall on me, and I was trying to get us to get the car so the fire didn't. This thing is just the fireworks for years. It was something I went to every year, and it was a pretty ingrained part. And I don't know what that says to what you're talking about, Ted, about need to know exactly why it was, but this is a pretty big holiday for me. So maybe there needs to be more movies along these lines.
Oh, definitely.
I would say to anybody still hesitant about watching this movie, fearing that because it's a musical and it might seem a little silly, that's what makes it great. That's what makes it great. That's what makes it watchable, is because it's a little silly and they sing songs and they're not perfect men and they crack jokes at each other and they're joking about who doesn't have testicles and who does. That's what makes it great. So it makes it tolerable. It's what allows you to take it in. I think that's why Hamilton did so well, because of the way there's humor in Hamilton, but the musical style allowed people to just kind of take it in. It wasn't done super serious, this is a sacrosanct event. So it's going to be if 1776 was Glengarry Glen Ross or 12 Angry Men, and it was just everyone trapped in a room.
Right, deathly serious.
Yeah, deathly serious. God, it would be even more unknown than it is now, and no one would like it. But because it's a musical,
I think it's very funny.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Yeah, I posted a couple of pictures on my Facebook, a different couple Facebook pages I have, of the three of them singing "The Egg Will Be Hatched" and on the staircase, and one girl, a very young girl, got in and goes, "Is that Mr. Feeney?"
Yeah.
And so then I quickly got on there. I said, "Yeah, and he's this, and he's this, and he's this," and he practically cornered the market on John Adams and John Quincy Adams for the rest of his life. So I think William Daniels. If you want to see great performances, how good is William Daniels?
He won the Tony, right?
No.
Oh.
You should have.
For his voice alone.
That's an interesting story because the rules of the Tony Awards at the time were that in order to be nominated for lead actor, your name had to appear above the title on the marquee, and his name did not. Nobody's did. He was clearly the lead actor, but he would have been put up as a supporting or featured actor, which is what the category is. And so he refused, just basically on principle. And actually, Ron Holgate, who plays Lee in the film and on stage and does his rousing The Lees of Virginia, he won featured actor in a musical Tony, basically for that one song.
Because then he leaves the movie.
Because then he rides off on horse. He won the Tony for that. He's in the movie and he's great. I mean, a lot of people everyone in the movie is great.
Mr. Feeney was why I watched this movie to begin with when I was 13.
Right.
Also, a little bit of trivia. He's the teacher and principal of Adams High in Boy Meets World.
Yeah.
They go to Adams High School.
And
I never knew that. Oh my God.
He voiced John Adams in a cartoon, and I think he played John Quincy Adams in some TV series. And he's amazing. He's a great career. I just watched his very first film just recently called Lady Bird, which is a really interesting Cold War film in the 60s, right in the mid 60s.
Yeah. And I mentioned Howard Da Silva before. He plays Franklin. He's great. Ken Howard plays Thomas Jefferson, who I knew as the White Shadow from he played a basketball coach, but he plays Thomas Jefferson, and Blythe Danner is Martha Jefferson. And I thought it was interesting trivia that Blythe Danner plays Martha Jefferson in this film, and then her daughter, Gwyneth Paltrow, plays Thomas Jefferson's daughter, Martha, in Jefferson in Paris.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Of course, I hate the point out inaccuracies, but apparently Martha was really sick during this period. Never really.
Yeah, she never actually went there.
No, yeah, he went to go visit her because she was sick. She suffered a lot of miscarriages, and he went to go visit her.
But I love the song. She comes out and sings with it too. So I think we would miss that song if it wasn't in there.
Yes, and it's a great humanizing moment for Adams as well, because he's the one that sent for her to come, because he gets to dance with her, and Franklin kind of makes fun of him, like, "Oh, I didn't know you could dance," and
Still some things we do in Massachusetts, Franklin.
I see something different every time I watch it, and it's really, really fun to watch William Daniels, how he modifies that his personality in that song, because you see. When Ben and Martha are singing, you can watch them, and it's really fascinating because he's like, "Okay, I'm really trepidatious about this, but I'll give it a go."
Yeah, no, lots of wonderful moments, wonderful cast. It's just a fun movie.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think Jack Warner, he was wanting to reproduce his My Fair Lady success.
Which is why he made sure that most of the cast from the original show was in this.
Yeah, that's that. You read? Yeah, I read that too. That he was, don't knock out William Daniels for a marquee name, and like he did for Audrey Hepburn over Julie Andrews.
Right.
That movie only won Best Picture. And then everyone forgot about it.
Yeah.
Well, AJ, Lani, Ted, I guess you guys are doing this.
Happy Independence Day.
Thanks for having us.
Happy Independence Day.
Yeah.